right, good evening. Welcome to the January 26th, 2026 Council Committee meeting. I am Council President Laurel Birchfield, Ward 4, and I will be chairing this meeting. I will now do a roll call. Council Member Reynolds.
Present.
Council Member Whitted.
Present.
Council Member Person.
Present.
Council Member Murphy.
Present.
Council Member Knappen.
Present.
Council Member Rainey.
Present.
Council Member Aldridge.
Present.
Next, I'd like to explain our procedures for public input. In an effort to enhance residents' ability to present information to the governing body, anyone interested in addressing the governing body is strongly encouraged to register to speak by noon on the day of the meeting, but it is not required. Information has been posted online about how to sign up. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no person may speak more than once to any one agenda item. Only comments related to city business are permitted. Disruptive acts are not permitted as per policy statement number 7 and will not be tolerated. After you're finished speaking, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. Additionally, comments can be submitted to the entire governing body via email at governingbody@cityofshawnee.org. There are 2 items on tonight's agenda. Item number 1, Johnson County United Link World Cup Transit Service. City Manager Paul Kramer will kick off the discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Birchfield. I'm going to turn this item over to Colin Duffy, our Deputy City Manager and expert of all things World Cup, to walk us through this item.
All right, good evening. So tonight's item is to review a transit proposal for the World Cup. Staff is looking for feedback on this proposal, and if there's consensus, to bring this item back for consideration at a future City Council meeting with a funding option. So to start, I am joined by Justice Welker, the Interim Director of Johnson County Transit. So I'll do my best to walk through this service as best as I can and then ask him to come up and fill any gaps that I've missed. So we are rapidly approaching the World Cup. We are just 135 days away from the first match in Mexico City. Visit KC projected around 650,000 unique visitors to the KC area during the World Cup. Argentina, England, the Netherlands, Algeria have all been rumored to set up base camp in the Kansas City area. And if that's true, the metro will need to be ready with public transit to help alleviate congestion and demand. As it stands now, there are 5 planned transit options for these visitors and for our residents. The first is the Region Direct, which is shown in red, which provides service to FanFest at Liberty Memorial. From 15 sites around the area. The second is the Airport Direct, which provides service from the airport directly to FanFest. The third is Stadium Direct, which is shown in dark blue, and that provides service to the stadium on match days. The fourth is Johnson County United Airport Drop and Ride, which provides service from the airport to the Overland Park Convention Center and Lenexa City Center. And finally, all of Ride KC's regular routes and operations will continue as normal. So the service we're talking about today is called a Johnson County circulator route called the Johnson County United Link. The intent of this link service is to provide enhanced mobility for visitors and residents so that they can visit key destinations and importantly, transit connections. This link is a bi-directional route connecting Shawnee, Leawood, Lenexa, Merriam, Mission, Olathe, and Overland Park through 3 different routes. The current proposal includes 14 stops to be serviced by 50 35-passenger vans, which is shown on the screen. One important item to note is that the service does plan to charge a fare. At this time, we do not know how those fares will be charged or what the amounts will be. But will likely be determined in coordination with KC 2026. Additionally, an important consideration for you all is the reimbursement formula to offset our upfront costs have also not been determined. This slide shows the routes for the United Link. You'll see 3 routes in red, blue, and purple. Each of these will have buses running clockwise and counterclockwise. The service is planned to run 35 to 42 days, depending on coordination again with KC 26, and will likely begin in early June and run through mid-July. The hours of operation have yet to be finalized at this time and will likely be dependent on match timing, but I would expect them to start around 8 a.m. and likely on match days go until midnight. The route's proposed location in Shawnee is located downtown near the intersection of Johnson and Neiman. This location was selected due to its proximity of restaurants and businesses, the city facilities of Shawnee Town 1929 and Splash Cove, and city events like Moonlight Market, plus Americana and Ales. All right, this slide represents the cost share partnership to operate the service. The total cost of the route is $5.7 million. Costs are largely determined by labor and operations at $4.3 million, leases of the buses at $1.1 million, and lodging for the drivers at $231,000. Half of this funding will come from existing federal grants that JCT already receives. $1.5 million will be obligated by KDOT to support this service, and the county's transit fund will cover $920,000, leaving $400,000 to be shared by the cities. The county determined population is the method to allocate the cost. So Shawnee will account for about 13% of the city share, which is about 1% of the overall cost at $52,651. So that is the request at this time to join the service. Now, the final piece to this is how do we finance that $52,651? Staff recommends designating using funds from the transient guest tax or TGT. TGT is a tax on overnight accommodations. So think of hotels or short-term rental stays. TGT can only be used for promotion of tourism and economic development activities. Utilizing TGT for JOCO, the Johnson County United Link, would be allowable use and recommended by staff. One last item to note is this project is unfunded. So one way to ensure that the TGT source doesn't impact, that this project doesn't impact TGT funds is to increase the tax by 1% to capture the amount needed to pay for this service. TGT is currently at 8%. Our charter ordinance allows 9% though. Other cities like Lawrence and Olathe have increased their TGTs for this very reason. And if you guys would like to do so, we can also bring that forward as a funding option as a companion item with approval of this item. So tonight, just to reiterate, I'm looking for general feedback on this service and to look for consensus on two items. The first is consensus to bring this to a council meeting for consideration. And the second is how you would like to fund this plan. So now I'd like to turn it over to Justice Welker to the podium to just fill in any gaps that I might have missed, and then we'll stand for questions.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the partnership with the city. As the proclaimed expert of World Cup, Colin did a great job. I don't have anything additional to add, but would stand for questions if any arise.
All right, thank you. Are there any council questions? Or Councilmember Reynolds?
Thank you. Would this initial funding or $52,000, would that be the entire amount that Shawnee would be expected to pay, or would there be future costs down the road?
For this amount, yes, this would be our not to exceed amount. If another city drops out though, I'm not sure how Johnson County has talked about addressing that shortfall.
Yeah, I think we have a funding strategy in place and we'd be able to encumber those funds if another city chooses not to participate.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nappen.
Yeah, I've got three questions. First of all, what is FanFest? I'm not an expert on this.
Yeah, FanFest is FIFA's official watch party or area for community gathering. And so that will be at Liberty Memorial.
Okay. Secondly, you said we don't know reimbursement amounts yet. Would the idea be that we get reimbursed in percent that's similar to what we originally contributed?
Yeah, most likely. I'd probably turn that over to Justice to talk about what they've been talking about.
Yeah, I think the details are still to be worked out there, but it'd be a pro rata share based on fair collection and what we bring in as a result of the service we provide.
Do you think it'll cover the cost? The upfront cost?
The cost that Shawnee is contributing? Yeah, details are to be worked out.
Okay. And then last, did you consider did you consider when you made the formula, I know you went by population of the city, but given that we only have one stop on it out of 14, did you consider to decide it based on that ratio?
Yeah, I think all things were considered. We did have some communication with the city and other jurisdictions looking at the best way to appropriately distribute those costs. And this is what we ended up with.
And finally, TGT is the transient guest tax, correct?
Correct.
And have we not, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we've already increased it twice in the last 3 years?
I think we've only increased it once, and that was 3 years ago, but we've talked about it at budget retreat, but I don't think we've made an action to actually increase it since then.
Okay, I'll be
So,
interested to find out because I thought it's been twice.
2020 was the last year where we adopted the 8%.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Aldridge.
The TGT or the tax, would that be an increase just for this time period, or would it be a just indefinite increase?
That would be the governing body's prerogative, whichever they choose to go.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? Councilmember Murphy.
Do we have, I should have asked this earlier in the day so somebody could look it up. Do we have an idea how much we bring in now in the transient tax? And if there's some thought on what that extra 1% would do?
Yeah, so the total we bring in is, at least in 2024, was 959,000. And 3% of that is already committed. 1% goes to Visit Shawnee and Shawneetown 1929. 2% goes to JCPRD. So that really leaves 5% that the city brings in. And I believe that amount is just over 100,000, maybe 120,000.
Thank you.
Is there another question over here? Councilmember Reynolds.
Sorry. Yeah, so trying to get better understanding then for the 120,000, is that already allocated or is that money available to go towards projects like this?
So if you were to increase it by 1%, that would be undesignated at this point. So you could push or designate this funding project for that.
Okay.
1%. Yeah.
There isn't currently any funding from the TGT tax like that still needs to be utilized in some way.
So could you repeat that question one more time?
So like TGT funds can only be used for sort of travel and tourism expenses.
Yeah, and economic development activities.
Okay. And is there any money that is like potentially available for the TGT from the TGT tax in 2025 that would need to be allocated in some way or?
Yeah, there's a balance in that fund. So you could dip into that if you'd so choose.
Okay. And sorry, one more kind of different topic. Any concerns around sort of congestion at the proposed stop location and anything the city would need to do to kind of mitigate that?
Yeah, a little bit. So ideally, we push this a little bit further down the block. I think that's an important thing to allow traffic to get further down. And I would have to talk to Justice about best practices for that. The biggest consideration for us, I think, comes down to events. So Moonlight Market and Americana and Ales, we will probably have to work with Johnson County Transit to determine an alternate route that at least alleviates that particular intersection. And maybe they're moving a block over and stopping at a mid-block crossing further down. But yeah, it could be. I would expect these to be rather quick stops. And I'm not sure. We already have a stop that's designated right now that services the Johnson-Quivira line that has a shelter on Neiman. And that's our proposed spot for this one. So it would operate similarly to what we already have going on.
And then, sorry, just general feedback as well. I really like this idea. Public transport in general, I think, is great. And having something particularly for such a well-attended event in Shawnee, I think, is a great thing too. So thank you for your efforts.
Councilmember Nappen.
Yeah, just one final random thought. It's going to be interesting to see what this does to the city. Obviously, we've got millions of people coming here. I don't know how much it will extend all the way to Shawnee, given the games being played at the stadium and fanfares down at Memorial Liberty Hall, Liberty Memorial. I'm sorry. But that said, it's interesting. I've got a wedding to go to that Saturday night out in Grandview, and I went to look for hotel prices and book something. And it was like an Econo Lodge was going for like $810 a night. It was exorbitant. So I've got to think Uber rates and Lyft and all that is going to be the same way probably. And there's definitely going to be a need in Johnson County, I think, for additional transportation and hopefully something like this that I assume would be relatively affordable compared to probably what else is going to be available for these folks. Don't love the fact that we don't know doesn't sound like we're very far down in the reimbursement. And so obviously my goal would be for us to get fully reimbursed. But it definitely, we're going to have that need. So I'm glad that y'all are planning and thinking ahead on it. Thank you.
Councilmember Person.
Thank you. So I'm a big proponent of public transportation as well. And I think for something like this, it's a great thing to look at. I'm curious if there's any studies that would show like what we expect the utilization to be, meaning like, do we know how many people in Shawnee have bought tickets to World Cup? Tickets have been on sale for a while. Is it going to be utilized mainly by people that live in Shawnee? Do we expect people coming from other communities, or any studies that show that at all?
Yeah, great question. I don't think that there's any information out there at this point. So right now, I think we're just trying to use our best guess on what it might be. But yeah, I've not seen anything from the city level. I'm not sure if the county has either. Yeah.
Go.
Councilmember Aldridge.
One more question. Where, I'm guessing this is going to be kind of like a park and ride. Are we going to have opportunities for them to park either maybe in this lot, or has there been thought to that?
Yeah, a little bit. My intent would be to push people more towards the parking that's at, City Hall, obviously, but we do have some public parking around the area, mostly at Splash Cove, though. So, there's some in the area that they would have to come towards and congregate down.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we did get numbers on the last time the TGT was increased. So it looks like in 2008, it was increased to 6%. And then in 2020, it was increased by 2% to 8%. And those have been the last two changes that we have.
Any other questions from the council? All right, I have a couple of questions then. Because I also very much appreciate public transportation and the efforts to increase ridership, especially with something like this. I'm just thinking about potential costs that I didn't see presented today. I'm assuming the bus situation is a result of the buses that were available and that we could access. Not having any kind of study about utilization, do we have a plan for if the need exceeds the availability? And I'm thinking primarily if we have a lot of people waiting in our designated transit stop, do we have plans for how to accommodate that?
Yeah, we are holding a few of the vehicles back. So we've rented 50 vehicles for this purpose. We don't anticipate having all of those vehicles in service at any one specific time. So we call them hot coaches available, so we can distribute those and dispatch those appropriately and accordingly.
That's good. And then how, this may be too in the weeds, so if it needs to be shared later, I totally understand, but how are we advertising and promoting this opportunity, especially knowing that we have so many visitors and different languages coming into our communities? Is there going to be an app developed? Is there going to be a plan for how we get this information out, especially with the timeliness of the routes and how often they come by?
Sure. Yeah, so Transit App is the app we utilize here in Kansas City. Every public transit agency utilizes the same app. These link services will be incorporated into that app. As for promoting and marketing the service, we're developing a plan right now. We're going to work in conjunction with KC 2026 to be able to distribute all information, all World Cup related information through every channel available. We'll also be working locally with the cities and the jurisdictions to tap into your marketing streams to push this information out.
I appreciate that coordination with our city comms department. One last call for council questions. All right. Did anyone sign up to make comments tonight?
We had no one pre-registered.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak? Okay. I assume we've all made our comments, but are there any comments that the council would like to make? All right. So I think that you are looking for feedback. You gave us 2 items that you're looking for a consensus on. The first being just, would we like to see this come forward? And then do we have a date for the next?
We could bring it as early as the next meeting.
Okay.
February 6th, I believe, or 9th.
Okay. Is there consensus from this body to see that on the agenda? Seeing yes.
All right.
Okay. And then the second question, could you rephrase that for us?
Yes. So this is talking about the funding. So I can bring it forward to be paid for through our TGT currently, or we could have a companion item for a increase of 1% to get us to 9 to help offset the costs or to absorb all of the costs.
So you're looking from us one or the other?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anyone who feels strongly that they would like to see one? Councilmember Nappen?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of increasing it. I feel like we fairly recently increased it. We're already at the higher level compared to our sister cities. And, I actually voted for the last one because you're basically just passing along. It's not an additional tax to our taxpayers, our constituents. But I want to remain competitive and not overtax our hotels here. So that would be my position on it. Thank you.
Colin, I want a clarification. You said that this could be a temporary increase or it could be permanent. Did I hear that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
What would that process look like for a temporary increase?
So you might designate a certain time for me to bring back the charter ordinance for you to then revise. As you would increasing it, you just bring it down.
So there is the option for us to increase it just to capture the increased funds during this period of time?
Yes, it's possible. Yeah.
Okay. I personally am in favor of an increase. I think that we will, in terms of competitiveness, I think that it's going to be a time where every possible lodging is full. And so I don't think we need to be too concerned about our sister cities with that. But I also see that several of our sister cities have, or not sisters, our companion cities in this county have increased by 1% already. So that I don't have an objection to seeing that come before the council for a 1% increase. Councilmember Murphy?
Yeah, and I think this is exactly what I said last time we had this conversation. But when I book a hotel room, I can honestly say I've never looked to see what the transient guest tax was. And I don't think that I would choose to go to a hotel in Lenexa or Leawood as opposed to here just because they had a 1 cent less guest tax. I mean, when you think about what the price of the rooms are and how little that actually is, I would be in favor of doing that raise to 9%.
Anyone else? Councilmember Whitted?
Yeah, I think the timing is too good to miss out. Whether it's a permanent 1% or even a temporary, if it's something we could change later, for some reason we felt it wasn't appropriate. But I do think raising it now would be taking advantage of a unique situation.
I'm seeing some heads nod. Councilmember Reynolds?
Yeah, given the comments just made, I think at least a temporary increase through the World Cup makes sense.
All right, Colin, does that give you what you need?
That it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Councilmember Nappen?
So can I ask where we landed here? Is this, you're going to come back with
I'll
with a
bring
temporary or a permanent?
So I will bring it back with what looks like a permanent, excuse me, increase, and then at a certain time, if you'd like to also have request that it be put on an agenda in August or July, I can bring it back then for us to change it.
Yeah, the concern would be it's set by a charter ordinance, which has notification requirements. And so you get it in, and then if you would like to, we'd have to look at whether we could put a time specific. Okay. So we could include that in the resolution to include it if we want to have a sunset.
Like personally, I would like to see it sunset. I think I might be outvoted here. I don't know where we would land, but we could just discuss it, I guess, at the council meeting, and whatever gets passed, gets passed.
I would appreciate the opportunity for you guys to maybe bring some more information about if other cities have done that and what that looks like, what the option would be. I would hate for us to put a sunset on it and then realize that the city actually would like to continue to have that 1% increase. I think that would not be a good look for us to then increase it again. So I'd like just a little more information, I think, at the next meeting about what that could look like. Is that consensus from the group? Councilmember Nappen?
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're good. All right, so I think we're on to item number 2, which is the sidewalk program update. City Manager Paul Kramer will kick off the discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Birchfield. Sidewalks have come up in a lot of discussions with the public, governing body members, stakeholders in the community. We handle sidewalks in a variety of different ways. The city of Shawnee does a lot of sidewalk work. And so just to give some clarity to what we do and any feedback that you have on questions about what we do or suggestions or comments about what we could do going forward, that we would talk about that tonight. So it's designed to be a back and forth discussion. If you have any questions, and Kevin Manning, our Director of Public Works, will kick off the item.
All right, so tonight, these are kind of the topics I'm going to go over. And as was just said, this is intended to be a discussion. So if you want to hop in on any of these points, feel free. We can talk more about it. But I'm just going to go over kind of our existing sidewalk network, how much we have in place right now. Talk a little bit about design. It's not overly complex, obviously, but what are we looking like when we design our sidewalks and shared use paths? How do we get those programmed? So how's a new sidewalk built within the city? I'll talk about that a little bit. How we maintain our existing sidewalk, and then some of the challenges that we run into. Some of these are a little counterintuitive, so I always like to talk about them. And then if there's any questions at the end, we can talk about those as well. So this is a map of our existing sidewalk around the city. You can see there in blue. So we've got about 260 miles of sidewalk, so quite a bit. You can see most of the areas that, like residential areas that were built recently, almost all those areas have sidewalk. Most of the areas, like on the east side of the city, more so on the northeast side, those areas that don't have sidewalk, that's kind of a similar, kind of like an inverse map to our SIP program. So most of the residential streets that you see don't have sidewalk on this map are SIP eligible, and in fact, almost all of them. And then you can see a lot of our arterial and collector roadways on the west side of the city. A lot of those do not have sidewalk as well. So where on the east side of the city, our arterials and collectors do have sidewalk. So that gives you an idea of what our existing sidewalk network looks like. And this is the inverse areas we don't have sidewalk. So once again, in the residential areas, primarily centered kind of in the eastern side, maybe a little bit in the northeastern quadrant of the city. And then there's a handful of other areas, residential areas spread out throughout the city that may not have sidewalk for a variety of reasons. And as I said, on the west side of the city, a lot of arterials and collectors don't have sidewalk as well. So moving on to just how we design sidewalk, the city standard is a 5-foot sidewalk. We ideally like to have 2 foot of green space between the sidewalk and the curb. If we get closer than that, we generally will bump our sidewalk out to 6 feet, like if we're back a curb. And the idea behind that is there's kind of a shy distance. People aren't as comfortable riding right alongside the curb adjacent to traffic. And so to make sure there's a true functionality of 5 foot, we'll widen that sidewalk out. But in this particular example, if we've got a little bit of green space between the sidewalk and the curb, the city standard is 5 feet currently. We do have a lot of sidewalk out there that's 4 feet wide. That is still basically meets ADA requirements. If we have basically a 5 foot passing area for wheelchairs every 200 feet. So if you're ever driving up and down Johnson Drive and you notice there's a little bit of a bulb out every 200 feet, you may have noticed that in the past. There's a reason for that. That's basically to make sure we're ADA compliant for a lot of our older sidewalks that were originally 4 feet. And you can see in this example, we went back at some point and replaced a few panels with a 5 foot section to make sure we were ADA compliant. So like I said, next time you drive up and down Johnson Drive, maybe during the day, take a look and you'll see some of these locations out there as well. We also install shared use paths. Shared use path is just kind of another name for a wide sidewalk. So kind of our standard for these is 10 foot wide. That's kind of a national standard. And 8 foot wide is considered acceptable. So the picture you see here on the left is the trail on the south side of Blackfish Parkway. And the picture on your right is the south side of Clear Creek Parkway. So Clear Creek Parkway was built, several years ago. Is more recent. So we have a wider path there, but these are kind of our standards for shared use paths when we get those installed. So looking at how we make these decisions, so what you see here on the right is basically the map of our circulation plan for the city. So basically, the red and blue routes are arterials and major collectors. And then you'll see some green in there as well. Those are our minor residential collectors. So based on the classification of roadway, kind of helps us determine what we want to do at each location for sidewalks and shared use paths. So think of these as kind of like the base option. We don't always do this for a variety of reasons. I'll cover that here in a minute, but ideally for like arterials, major collectors and minor collectors, we would have a 5 foot sidewalk on one side of the road and then a 10 foot shared use path. We're like a local street. So, if a subdivision comes in and those are all local streets, we're only going to have sidewalk on one side. We typically won't have a shared use path. So As I just mentioned, that's kind of a guide. It's not always what happens. We've talked about the Midland project. So originally when the Midland project was conceived, we had a 5-foot sidewalk on one side and a shared use path on the other side in conjunction with our kind of design standards. But throughout the design process, it was kind of determined that was going to have maybe a larger impact on residents on one side than was desired. And so the decision was made to take that shared use path out. And so another example that's on our SIP project up on 51st Street, when that was originally, when the west side of 51st Street was originally constructed and widened out, shared use paths weren't really as much in vogue. And so they just had a 5-foot sidewalk on both sides. So when we looked at continuing that project to the east to Quivira, we considered, do we want to add a shared use path? But we kind of just decided in conjunction with working with the governing body, obviously, to just continue the existing section. So we weren't going to have just one section kind of come out of nowhere of a wider sidewalk and not continue to the west. So on that particular section, we just continued with 5-foot sidewalks on both sides. So like I said, that's kind of this is kind of our guide, but in practice, standards change and, each project is unique. And so we kind of make those decisions individually and don't always follow a one-size-fits-all process. So in terms of actual, development and how does sidewalk get built in the city, there's a few different examples I'm going to share. And one of them is just new development. So these are all 3 pictures, kind of a time lapse of an existing residential development. And when this goes in, as homes are built, the individual basically builder is responsible for building the sidewalk along that frontage. So you can kind of see on the picture on your left, there's no sidewalk in place, but as those homes get finalized and built, you can kind of see sidewalks start creeping up in the middle. And then on the right side, basically the subdivision's built out for the most part, and you can see kind of continuous sidewalk through there. And as I mentioned earlier, on our local streets in Shawnee, we only require sidewalk on one side of the street, which is why you see it on one here and not the other. We also build sidewalks as part of new roadway projects. So this is a section of Monticello Road. Previously, it was just kind of a very narrow, kind of county roadway. And then when the city came in on this particular project, we added a shared use path on one side of the roadway on the west side and a sidewalk on the east side. So, we do build new sidewalks, but many times it's part of a larger roadway project. And then finally, just as an example of a SIP project. So this is Monrovia, north of Johnson Drive. That was just completed fairly recently. And once again, time lapse, you can see on the left, there was no sidewalk here, and then it's under construction in the middle. And on the right side, we've completed, once again, bringing this street up to our modern standards, which is what the SIP program is all about, and adding sidewalk on the west side of that roadway. So those are kind of the main ways that we currently kind of add sidewalk. We do have a mill and overlay program. I'll talk a little bit about that. We basically replace about 2 to 4 miles of sidewalk every year. Now that's more maintenance focused. It's not necessarily new sidewalk, but like I said, about 10 to 20,000 feet of different sections of sidewalk that are maybe in disrepair, maybe they've settled, there's some cracking going on, a lot of different things like that. So we do replace quite a bit of sidewalk every year. And as part of the mill and overlay, we also look for opportunities to kind of tackle what I'll term like low-hanging fruit. If we've got flat areas that we feel like we don't need a lot of design, our contractor is comfortable going out and putting in new sidewalk, we will look for those opportunities. Just this year on the mill and overlay program, there was a section of Midland, different section of Midland than what we've been talking about, but just west of Monticello. We actually had a request from the Mill Valley Cross Country team. They run in that area quite a bit on the south side of Midland, west of Monticello, and they'd asked for sidewalk. We went out and took a look at it. It made a lot of sense to put it in. We were going to be out there overlaying anyway, and so the stars kind of aligned for us to go out and do some work like that. So we will take those opportunities if they present themselves, but kind of the key there is it can't be overly complex. If there's a lot of great issues or a lot of things in the way, our contractors aren't comfortable necessarily just laying that out and kind of winging it at that point. We need a little bit more design. When we do our sidewalk replacement, we do go back and replace at the same width. So I showed some different examples earlier. So if we have an existing 4-foot sidewalk, we're not going back in and just replacing 2 or 3 panels at a wider section. We do keep the same width when we do our maintenance. And then we also do some sidewalk grinding, and we will go out and replace a few panels on occasion with our own internal staff if needed as well. So just kind of going back to our areas with no sidewalks. So, the city there's been some desire over the years to maybe look at potentially trying to take a more aggressive approach on adding some additional sidewalks in some of these areas. And so if that's something the governing body was ever interested in, that kind of the next stage or easiest streets to tackle would be streets that have existing curb and gutter. And this is a good example of that on the picture on the right. Picture on the left. We've got a fair amount of streets like this. Most of our streets remaining do have a variety of challenges. And I showed this picture on the left here because you can see the trees all the way down. So, when you're looking at this, there appears to be some room to add sidewalk, but sometimes we run into issues with tree roots. We're concerned about the drip line of those trees, which extends over the center of the roadway. And so those are the kind of things that we've worked with or, and heard from property owners that they have concerns with, where we don't want to, once again, come in on a street like this on your left of the screen and put in sidewalk and then damage, a large row of mature trees. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. Another example of something that's a little more difficult for us is ditch section streets. We've been asked in the past, can we just put some curb in or fill in that ditch and put sidewalk on top? And our answer to that has really been like, when you think of like a ditch section street, if you want to put a sidewalk in, that's not really a sidewalk project. It's more like a stormwater project, because you have to basically enclose the drainage. You're installing curb, and enclosing the drainage is probably 10 times the cost of the sidewalk in terms of the stormwater pipe, the curb that's needed. And so, it's certainly something that's possible. And that's essentially what we're doing with our SIP projects, but it's not in terms of cost, it's not really a sidewalk project. It's more like a stormwater project. And so those projects are just more expensive. And that's why the SIP program, we're chipping away at it, but, those projects are expensive. And so, like I said, there are some streets that we may be able to look at and see if it makes sense to potentially add some sidewalk if they already have curb. And that would be probably, like I said, the lowest remaining hanging fruit. And this, a few other examples, we do run into issues with landscaping, things within the right of way, and then utilities that sometimes get moved. So that's a challenge. And then sometimes we do run into people that just like the status quo. I mean, I think it's a little surprising, it's kind of a little bit of a lesson learned for me, but some people are just adamant. They do not want sidewalk. They think, I've heard concerns about vagrancy. It's going to lower my property values. This city's going to be writing tickets to me because I'm not shoveling, a sidewalk in front of my house. And we do not issue tickets for that. But, people are concerned about things like that. So those are things that we have to work through. But from the city's perspective, we don't really have a lot of desire to go out and install like piecemeal sidewalk based on individual input from residents. We want broad consensus to basically, if we're going to do a street, we want to do the whole thing. We don't want to come in and do 4 houses and have a gap of 2 houses because they don't want it and go back. So that's always just something to think about. I think generally sidewalks are viewed as positive, but sometimes we do have residents for whatever reason would prefer not to have them. So that's just something to think about. So that's just kind of a fairly brief overview of our our approach to sidewalks. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Kevin. Do we have any questions from council? Councilmember Reynolds first and Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you. And thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all that and answer all the questions I've already bugged you with about this as well. Kind of one question going back to the streets that do currently have ditches and maybe are more interested in kind of getting curbs and trying to mitigate the ditches rather than the sidewalks themselves. I know that typically that's going to require that stormwater pipe be put in, and that's the bulk of the cost. Are there cases where the ditch could be filled in and a curb could be put there if, like, without stormwater, if it was connected to drains on streets nearby, or is that something that would not be feasible?
Well, obviously, if you fill in the ditch and put curb in, that water is still going to go somewhere, and you're basically like consolidating that water at a lower position, and it's likely to cause issues. Like, things can always be done from an engineering perspective, but like when we design a modern residential road, that drainage is constructed so you're not overwhelming one inlet pipe down, and because if you do consolidate water too much, you need a very large inlet, and there's a variety of issues that can cause. But to answer your question, there's not really a silver bullet on that stormwater design. That's really the challenge of our SIP program, and why we would love to do more streets, but we just haven't been able to due to the cost to adequately address like the stormwater issues.
Councilmember Murphy.
Now, this is kind of a specific question. We've talked about the fact that Larson Lane was going to get a sidewalk between 65th and 67th, which is also directly across almost from the grade school.
Yes.
Do we also look at that point at things like from 65th north in that same neighborhood? There are no sidewalks, and that neighborhood has asked me about how they can get that. Would we consider looking to see if there's a way to somehow make a connection so the kids north of there could get to that new sidewalk and walk to the grade school?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look at any particular circumstance, and I'm not familiar with the particular roads just north of that. I can't see it in my mind's eye, but
right behind the Quick Trip.
Yeah. I'll go back to our SIP program. We just did our reevaluation. One of the things that's occurring with SIP is you're going to see, as that program continues, kind of the grouping of sidewalks, and that's really the point of that, because part of the scoring is that each individual road scores higher the more streets it connects that have sidewalks. Okay, so if you've got a street that has no connections to other streets with sidewalks, it's going to score lower. But as it starts getting connected to streets with sidewalks, for the example that you're using, it makes more sense to kind of fill in those gaps and complete the system. And so, we've already seen it. I saw it with the last go around where, like, with the first 5 or 6 streets that had SIP projects, all the streets around them scored higher, and we're going to continue to see that as we work through the program.
Councilmember Person.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that walkability, bikeability is important to everybody. It's important to the health of the community. Being a resident in Ward 2, obviously looking at the graph you showed us a little bit earlier, we are very deficient in certain areas for sidewalks, walkability and bikeability, which is unfortunate. And I understand it's the older part of Shawnee, but it's unfortunate because a lot of people like to live near a downtown area to be able to walk to different things, bike to different things, events, restaurants, that type of thing. And that's exactly what attracted my wife and I here when we were deciding where to move our family to. I understand that it takes some time to get those looked at, to look at where we should build curbs, gutters, all the infrastructure that goes into it. One of my main concerns, and I've emailed before I was on council, but the stretch of Johnson Drive from basically Flum down to Neiman, right? So we've got a dog, we go for a lot of walks. And again, as a family, we want to be able to feel safe walking down Johnson Drive to get to the events downtown. Most of the sidewalks, when you're talking about the green space on the outside of the sidewalk and then the wider sidewalks, we just don't see that. So there's so many areas where there's retainer walls, sidewalk, street. So there's no green space at all. There's really a lack of safety there. There's other areas where there's strip malls up here where there's parking lot, sidewalk, and then smooth surface onto the road. There's not even a curb there, right? So 2 strip malls in particular here that are very unsafe to walk on. There's a lot of areas where when they dig out the snow, right? When they dig out during the snowstorms like this, there's piles of snow that they pushed onto the sidewalk. So if I even wanted to walk down that street, I couldn't until the snow melts there. And then one other thing is just the safety for the school kids. So there's St. Joe's here, and then just further west, there is Ray Marsh, where I see kids walking back and forth up Johnson Drive. And again, walking on sidewalk where there's no grass on, as a buffer from there to the street. And I actually was driving down Johnson Drive heading west one time. Kid fell into the street in front of me from the sidewalk, again, with no buffer. It was directly into the street. And if I was somebody that was, just looking at my cell phone, I would have ran the kid over. So it's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that I heard a lot of when I was knocking doors, people that live along the corridor and even in between, like Shawnee Mission Parkway and Johnson Drive. There's obviously no sidewalks on Shawnee Mission Parkway. So if they're going to walk anywhere, they'll come out onto Johnson Drive, and just having those stretches of even when we've got trash days, trash cans go out onto the sidewalk. You have to walk onto Johnson Drive to get beyond them. There's no other way to especially where there's those streets with the retaining wall. So I don't know what can be done. I know it's probably something that's a big challenge, but again, it's something I'm passionate about raising kids here. Like I said, I want to be able to feel safe with them walking down Johnson Drive to get to Flying Cow Gelato or walk to Splash Cove, that type of thing. So not necessarily a question, but just a statement. And again, I don't know what can be done, but that's something that I would love to have looked at.
Any other questions? Kevin, I desperately just want to zoom in on this map and see all the details of all the spaces that are not connected. Is that possible to have a map that is interactive where we can actually go in and see where the connection
Yeah,
is?
we can get that set now.
Okay. And it's just curiosity because I agree with what I've heard the other council members say tonight. The connectivity is a huge issue. I live kind of off Midland when it goes from 75th to Blackfish and it starts going north. And there is this weird space where there's sidewalk, no sidewalk, then sidewalk again. And I've had members of my community ask for a completion of that sidewalk. But I think it's really important for us to recognize that we also passed a change in our ordinance that requires youth on e-scooters and unicycles to be on the sidewalk. And we have places where there are no sidewalks, or there's a sidewalk and then there's a gap and they have to go onto the road to get back onto the sidewalk. So I think it's very important, and I appreciate the way that you think about how we're investing in our sidewalks and where they need to go with connectivity. But I think it's very important that we focus on fixing those gaps and making sure that people, if we pass something that requires them to use a sidewalk, they have a sidewalk to use. So thank you for that. Did anyone sign up to make comments?
No one is pre-registered.
Okay, would anyone like to speak from the audience? Okay, any last comments from the council? All right, well, this was for informational purposes only and was very informational. Thank you very much, Kevin. All right, that concludes our agenda. I will accept a motion to adjourn. Councilmember Reynolds. Do I have a second? Councilmember Rainey.
Second.
All right, motion has been made. Second on this item. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone wants to say no? All right, motion passes. We are adjourned.